Good evening and happy Monday to anybody who might be listening. I hope you all had a holy and refreshing feast of Christ the King, or if you went to the extraordinary form of the Mass, 24th and last Sunday after Pentecost. I had the great joy and privilege of watching one of my friends enter into full communion with the Catholic Church. And, it was at my home parish, actually, where I went when I was in high school, and it was quite the magnificent celebration. So, great things happening in South Fargo. Um, but there's something else I'm just curious on ruminating on, right? And there's a naive thought that seems to occur to a lot of people. Maybe when they're young, this is an easy sort of mistake that you could fall into, is that the idea that you can figure absolutely everything out with your intellect. That your intellect, as long as you've got enough information and enough time to consider that information, that absolutely everything can be figured out by your intellect. And I don't think that's actually true. Um, I think there's a more subtle role for the will to have in even knowing the truth, and it's not just all a matter of dispassionate calculation of the intellect. And I think the easiest way that we can see the working out between the intellect and the will here is taking an example of somebody buying a house. Perhaps many of you listening have actually gone through this. It's merely theoretical for me. My house is just given to me. It's one of the perks of the job. But never mind that. So I can imagine what it's like to buy a house. And, your intellect certainly has something to do with the decision to buy the house, right? And you can imagine, let's say somebody looks at 10 different houses when they are going through the whole process there. They look at 10 different houses. Uh, I bet you a number of those you can, just with your intellect, rule out. This one is too expensive. This one is too far out of town. This one is too small. This one has a bad foundation. This one has a bad roof that we wouldn't be able to afford to repair. It is not a good deal. All of those sorts of calculations, your intellect, after considering what you need out of a house, what you can afford, your intellect can actually rule a fair number of those houses out, right? And just with the use of your intellect there. So I'm not saying that the intellect here is unimportant. Well, let's imagine a scenario where you've seen 10 houses and you figured out pretty quickly that 8 of them aren't going to work. They're just not. There's something wrong with each and every single one of them, and you shouldn't buy them. But you have two that, at least to your intellect, both of them seem good. There is not anything to rule one or the other out. You can't, just by thinking about it, choose one house or the other. Your intellect can't necessarily know the house perfectly, know exactly what you need. It might be hovering between these two different good and, as far as you can tell, equally plausible options there. The only way that you will be able to make a decision is if your will decides, if your will reacts to the goodness of one or the other houses and decides that we just need to make a decision. We need to be able to sign the paperwork and close on the house, and accept the risk of not knowing 100% for sure if this house is going to be a good deal. It might be highly probable. Your intellect might be able to discern a very high degree of probability, but it won't be able to necessarily know with certitude that this is going to be a good house for us to purchase. So I think this is a useful thing to consider. One, because Oftentimes, the rhetoric around in our culture prizes too highly the intellectual part of man and doesn't give enough credence to the will, because the will has all sorts of important things to do. And when it's going wrong, it can show up in all sorts of funny ways. And I think it's also specifically something that can come to play in discussions about religious belief. And these considerations are not strictly theoretical. I had an opportunity to talk with somebody who's in the classes to become Catholic. And this is a very, intellectual, bright fellow. And he's also highly conscientious. I think I could tell just by the short amount of time that I was talking with him. And he had like hacked most of his way through Cardinal Newman's essay on the development of doctrine. It is really funny that that it's called an essay, because it's like a 300-page treatise. It's not an easy book to get through. And Cardinal Newman, or St. John Henry Newman, doctor of the church, is handling some pretty difficult subject matter there, using some pretty advanced vocabulary. So it's not an easy book necessarily to read and understand. And yet, like he's done the work, and he's still, hanging in the balance between Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And his intellect, and I discerned this in our conversation last week, his intellect wasn't able to tell which one was more true. He's just like, I'm held up in the his intellect was circling the airport, right? Could not make a decision to land there. And so the advice that I gave him was that he needed to turn to prayer. That I framed it especially as like, you need to trust that God's going to lead you where you need to be. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. You have all the arguments. He literally showed me his laptop screen, where he had typed out a very well structured consideration of the different arguments there. It's like, he doesn't need more arguments. He doesn't need more information, because his intellect is not able to come to the final answer on these questions. He needed to engage the will to do this. And I think it was good advice. I would give it again in the same circumstance, that he needs to bring this to prayer, and he needs to allow the grace of God to move him there. And, just based on the way he responded, I think he will make an attempt at that. Like, I think he understood that was what he needed to do. And we'll see what the fruits of that are. Because that's what faith is not merely the work of the intellect. Faith is not merely the work of the intellect. It is the work of the will and the intellect working together. Because we can distinguish. There are certain things that you can't not know, right? But that's actually a very small amount of things that are like this perfect, rational, deductive knowledge. When you get the proof of a theorem worked out, your mind, your intellect just has to believe it because it's been conformed to it so perfectly. But most of our lives are not like that. Most of our lives are not subject to that same level of rational consideration. Most of our lives, we have to eventually, the will commands the intellect to land the plane somewhere there. And faith is certainly that, because we don't have the vision of it the same way we do with those things that we can't not know. Ultimately, faith is the act of the intellect assenting to divinely revealed truths by the command of the will, having been moved by God's grace. That's St. Thomas Aquinas's definition for the act of faith. And your will always come in there, which means that if your will is attached to the wrong thing, your intellect's going to go astray. Will happen every time. And so when you're arguing with somebody, take care of whether or not you are throwing your pearls before swine, because your arguments might not necessarily land with somebody. If their wills are attached to an evil object, then all of the arguments in the world will not improve their status there. So that's what I've got. Mark confirms that he's bought 2 houses. I've been in one of them. Be ye doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. Thank you, Ixnad, or should I say James. And one cannot intellectualize their way out of being a muppet. That's true. That's true. Sometimes if you're in a prison made out of thought, more thinking is not going to help you there. Yeah, it happens. It happens. Hello, Aeon Lancer. And hello, Andrew, as well. Father, I live in a Spanish-speaking country, but I wonder if I moved to the U.S., would not being baptized in English affect anything? No, that will have no effect whatsoever on your status as a Catholic, as long as it was done with a approved translation, something like Baptizo en el nombre de Padre e Hijo e Espíritu Santo, something like that. Then that should be perfectly valid. Yeah. So yeah, don't worry about it. And Andrew says, good morning. So good morning. And Mark, good evening.
Good evening, Father. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. I went to the best parish potluck ever yesterday. Just mounds of food served family style on really nice tablecloths. Like,
Excellent.
what more do you need? So
nothing more.
Yeah, it was like we had mass and then the best parish potluck ever. So here we are.
That's great. I didn't know parishes did potlucks in the Catholic areas.
Yeah, well, so this wasn't like a regularly scheduled potluck. This was a bishops in town potluck.
I see.
So it was a really small parish in really the middle of nowhere, and a bunch of people who don't go there every Sunday, but probably used to, all showed up, and we just had a grand old time,
That's good. That's good. Yeah, that was always the weakness of Catholics. Was they don't do anything after Mass. They just kind of disperse. Very boring.
Well, it's another good thing that Father Luke is doing at my home parish is he's got coffee and donuts every Sunday after the 9 o'clock and the 11 o'clock Mass. So, it's you have the Eucharist and then you have donuts. It makes sense to me. I don't know how people overcomplicate this.
Yeah, seems easy.
When does the church use canon law? What's the occasion for pulling out the big book of canon law? So the church, a lot of canon law is just kind of writing down what we were already doing. So, that's so a lot of times you don't have to pull out the book. You just do the thing there. But there's the general norms. That's book 1. Book 2 is the people of God. Tells you how to run diocese. Tells you how to run the Roman curia and those parishes and religious institutes. Book 3 is teaching office. It's real thin. Tells you about who's allowed to talk and who's allowed not to talk and whose permissions you need. Book 4 is the sacraments. We spend a lot of time there and other acts of divine worship. Book 5 is temporal goods. So when we're doing property stuff, we got to do some book 5 stuff. Book 6 is penalties. We hope we don't have to use that one too often, but if we need it, it's there. And book 7 is procedures. And procedures is only for nerds like me, not for normal people, right? Like, don't even come here and talk about like the joinder of issues and the qualifications of an advocate unless you've been through Father Beale's procedures class. Like, I don't want to hear it, but I do want to hear from Jacob.
Father Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to a big snowstorm tomorrow and the official beginning of winter. So
We had rain here, so that's like as winterish gets in Los Angeles.
I hope everybody was all right.
The first rain tends to be the most dangerous because it brings all the oils on so it becomes really slippery, and yeah, but yeah, I got through it okay.
Well, the first snowfall is the exact same thing, but probably worse.
I can imagine.
Yeah, yeah. Like, it's like the EMTs and the police are like, "All right, everybody, get ready. Tomorrow's the first snowfall. It's gonna be a mess." You know.
I when I went up to visit Sherry, I ended up buying chains for my tires and putting on chains for the first time. That was an experience.
So we don't have the hill, so you don't need the chains quite so badly.
Okay.
You can do with just driving slower and braking earlier. But yeah, if you got the mountains, that's when you're really going to want the chains there.
There are places you're not allowed to drive during certain months without having chains.
Yeah, none of those are North Dakota.
So there's a reason I came on. Father, have you heard of this internet concept I was unfamiliar with called lulcows? Okay, so I had an encounter on my channel with a lulcow who unfortunately claims to be a Catholic apologist at that. And these people have large audiences. And so I thought the only thing I could think of, and it actually goes along with the speech you gave at the beginning, is there's no rational way to help these people. They need Jesus. And that's why I am broadcasting your live stream on my channel right now, in the hopes that any people who may be following, and I'll explain what a lulcow is, might have an encounter with Jesus by listening to an actual Catholic priest. So a lulcow, it comes from laughing out loud, and the idea of a cow being something you milk, like you go back to it for lulls over and over again. And these are people who live their lives on the internet, and they are like, they make scenes and they do dramatic things, which people then, mostly out of a sense of sadism. It's kind of like Jerry Springer, but on the internet and YouTube.
Great.
Yeah. So I won't even bother mentioning who the particular lolcow was, but he came on one of the streams on my channel, and I wasn't even on there to begin with. And
well, that's your first mistake, but never mind that.
Allowing people to stream on my channel. No, actually, I eventually had to jump on and put these people in their place. But I also got the largest. I had 60 people last Sunday listening to one of my live streams because of these. Like, there's, and it seems to me like a serious spiritual sickness. I mean, I was actually wondering if it qualifies as a sin to like
to engage in that level of buffoonery,
or to get your lulls that way of paying attention to Like, is watching a Jerry Springer episode? I mean, I think it definitely pollutes your soul. I don't know if it, like, is it a sin though?
Yeah. I mean, it's not edifying, and somebody who's got good formation should be able to figure that out. That it's not edifying. That you've got a puerile interest in these things there, and so yeah, there's a lot of things that. I mean, it wouldn't go straight to like, I watched an episode of Jerry Springer, therefore I can't go to communion. Like, I don't think it would be that level, but, even what we would call venial sins do weaken charity and weaken the virtues in you and pollute the imagination and all sorts of other things. And so it's not like we treat them flippantly there. So yeah, I think that sort of puerile, buffoonish entertainment in very high doses, especially if it's at the expense of good order, right? So we could look at something like the Three Stooges, right? And it's like, okay, you watch a Three Stooges episode, it's very buffoonish, but that's what you're watching, and like, they aren't actually hurting each other that much, so there's not much danger to it. Airing out people's real lives in the Jerry Springer show, that's I don't know, that's not good. It's not good for anybody involved, frankly, except for the advertisers. And then yeah, I would think that, especially if they're coming on to what could be a serious and orderly discussion, and not just making it lighthearted, but making it foolish, that could be a serious. That's not good. That's not good. We'll call it bad. Call it evil.
These people actually got under Chezi's skin, which is pretty hard to do. Chezi's a pretty, even-keeled guy. But, yeah, they... and apparently, I mean, they have this thing. It's a father-daughter team, and she's very pretty. And apparently, she's using her fame to get money and things from men. So, yeah, it was a wholly... Like, I mean, I don't know if I can say it's bad that I know this concept exists, but now that I know more about it, it just does feel demonic to me.
Yeah, I mean, and we just remember that. So I'll just say a point to Jan God here. In Catholic theology, demon possession means that they have control of your body. That's a very rare thing, but there could be demonic temptations, or obsession or oppression. Temptations, that's something that everybody faces. You get something introduced via your imagination. Obsessions is where your mind keeps on coming back to something, being pulled by a force that can't really be explained through natural causes, and oppression being a consistent operation on your passions and appetites. So I wouldn't necessarily say possession. I know people use that word very very freely, but yeah, if there's if it's just that disruptive and self-serving, there's going to be some manner of evil influence there.
Which reminds me, I got that book. I believe you were the one who recommended it. It's Diary of an American Exorcist by Stephen Rossetti.
I would recommend that book. He's a reliable author. I don't remember recommending it recently, but it
was a while ago.
Yeah.
I think I asked you when I was doing my internship with Catholic Charities about like demonic possession and stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was a while ago then.
That was a while ago. Yes, I am starting my new internship tomorrow. Actually,
Well, I hope it goes well.
I hope so too. But it's in a locked ward, and from the people I have met so far, yeah, it's doubtful I will be able to be very helpful to them because they tend to be not the most responsive of people.
Yeah, to get in a locked ward in the 21st century requires a
In California.
in California. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just pray to the Lord of Heaven to send grace, and maybe you can make things a little bit better and not worse. So.
That is my hope. By the way, this is my new dog.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Lucky.
Oh, poodle?
He is a golden doodle.
Golden doodle. Okay, so not too smart for its own good.
Yeah, he's 3/4 poodle, 1/4 golden retriever.
Might still be a little too smart for his own good. My sister had a poodle, and I was like, if this dog were just a little bit dumber, he'd be much happier.
That's why they created doodles.
Yeah.
That
Because
is
golden
why...
retrievers are pretty dumb. So yeah, it's the perfect blend right there.
Yeah, and he's teething, which is why he's constantly mouthing everything, including.
You got to go get a chew toy then.
He has enough. My entire apartment is littered with chew toys and things he imagines are chew toys, including my glasses, which now have scratches on them because he has decided he likes them.
Well, just make sure I like dogs, but I don't like poorly trained dogs.
Yes, he's going to be way too big to be poorly trained. He's not even 4 months yet.
Yeah, no, poodles can get pretty big, so
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's a lot of fun, and now I know about LOL cows.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of sad. Like, there's one person who, like, he was morbidly obese, and he seems like an incredibly nice person. And the fact that people watch him, like, I've watched some of his stuff. His life has been very sad, but kind of improving and stuff. So that doesn't seem so bad to me. But a lot of people, a lot of people seem to gravitate towards the people whose lives are really horrible. And like in Los Angeles, we have this thing where there are people who will do literally anything to be famous.
That's one way to end up in Los Angeles.
Yep. And that seems to me to be what's going on in a lot of these people's lives. But then giving them an audience seems like it's, especially when they do stupid things or claim to do stupid things. Yeah, it just seemed bad. I literally thought these people need Jesus.
Or at least Orson Scott Card. I don't know if you've ever read Ender's Game, but it had an early version of the internet on it.
Okay.
But it was like very gate kept. You needed to have like certain credentials to be able to publish and all of that. And it was not the very flat and open platform that we were actually delivered. And he was writing this back in the 80s, right? So, no shame on him for not really understanding how it was going to develop. But yeah, it's just funny to to read the way that the plot ends up working out and being like, yeah, that's not how it works. Anybody can broadcast themselves. Father Sykes is broadcasting himself right now.
I was surprised to be nostalgic for the days when Jerry Springer kept a limit to how crazy people could be. Because these people, yeah.
I mean, yeah, now, like, what is to prevent you from doing like a 6-hour, absolutely ridiculous nonsense live stream, right? Like Jerry Springer had to keep that in at 24 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. These people know, like, apparently part of how these people became famous was the mother, the father, and two of the kids were on live having like this huge argument that ended up with the police being called. But given the history of the family, which I know way too much about, it seems like the only reason, like they were just doing it for show, and that's why all four of them were on camera simultaneously broadcasting this supposed family fight. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like the stupidest form of vainglory imaginable.
Yep.
It's just,
And Yon God, no, this is in no way a confession. Believe it or not, my life is crazier than I let on YouTube.
he just gives us the Magic the Gathering cards and the dog.
Yes, the dog and the cat and the beautiful stuff. Because I do believe that life should be presented as just a tiny bit nicer than it actually is. Not too much nicer.
All right. Well, there we have it. Everything you ever wanted to know.
The lolcat is part of the troll culture. It's been around on the internet a lot longer than anything
It's a lul
else.
cow. A
Lol
lul
cow,
cow there.
whatever.
Yeah.
It's all the same. So anything for the lulls. It's just you're looking for audience, and a lot of people are like the whole lull thing is very. It had a name before that. That's why I'm always like, oh look, another newbie came out of his internet bubble after however many years of being on the internet. And if you didn't live through Goatsy, you don't know how bad the internet could be. Goatsy was
Did you have to mention that?
You just gave a bunch of 30-somethings trauma there, Mark. Hello, Denise. You've got some buzzing coming through on our audio there. It might be solved by yeah. Well, there that solves it. If you have a pair of headphones around, that might help it too. So
or just turning down the volume or something. Yeah, I don't know what we were hearing.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's just probably going to buzz anytime. Oh, that's better. That's a lot better.
Yeah, it'll be okay as long as you're speaking. When you're not speaking,
everybody's roboting at my end.
Well, you got to
there
pay
seems
for
to be a lag and a lot of roboting at my end.
Well, we're going to try again in 2 minutes then.
Yeah, give it a couple minutes.
Give it a couple minutes. See if her internet can catch up to us, and then we'll try again. We'll try again. You're not getting kicked out.
We're seeing a lot of people kind of their bubbles are bursting. The ones who say everyone else is in a bubble, they don't realize they're in a bubble, and then they're finding things that have been there longer than they've been on the internet and going like, "Oh my goodness," and then not even necessarily believing them. Right, like a lot of people are like, "How are these metrics real? How do people watch this?" Like, well, look, the internet's pretty good with metrics since that's all it can do at all. So it's and then with the Twitter and the location thing, everyone's misreading that data because nobody understands how to read data, and so they're mistaking things like how people are making money for the veracity of the audience they're making money off of, which is a totally different thing, right? They can't separate things because to understand even a small portion
Can
of the
you
internet.
give like a specific example of that? I haven't been following it at all, and maybe some other people in the
Yeah,
audience
I mean,
haven't been either.
so on Twitter right now, they're doing things like, oh, so and so's clip channel is run by somebody in India. Well, of course it is. That's because they can make like $300,000 a year on a small clips channel that would make nothing in the US, by the way, or not enough to make it worthwhile. So it's worth their time. But the thing is, that doesn't affect the audience that's looking at the clip channel. It doesn't say anything about where they're from or what they believe, right? And so if you confuse the author of the channel, for example, with the audience of the channel, because you're stupid, because most people are stupid, you'll draw wrong conclusions about what's going on. So for a lot of
Right,
people,
right, and that's, I mean, that's what I've seen more of is, people like, oh, we've got this guy that's like, Fred Western aesthetic,
yeah, yeah,
and apparently he's an Indian fellow, and like he's allowed to appreciate these things.
right,
And I'm not going to stop him, but like the way he was presenting himself was like this, Nordic defender of the culture thing when it's like an
right.
online LARP. So that's what I've been seeing a lot more of, just kind of blowing over.
Well, and there's some of that, but like I said, there's this other new confusion where people are like, oh, so and so runs this clips channel from India or from Romania or something, or one of these other very cheap to live in countries where there's a loophole with the way advertiser dollars are counted, and so it's very lucrative. A channel that wouldn't be lucrative in the US to run is very lucrative over there to run.
But that's
And then
more
of
than
course,
just currency exchanges. That's like they're
yeah, there's
getting
all
paid
kinds of
more.
math. There's all kinds of wacky side effect arbitrage math going on, right? It's way more than currency. But what ends up happening is people get very confused. The other confusion they have, like Yon God, big surprise, is you can say anyone from an Eastern Bloc country is a Russian disinformation person. And the problem is that's because it's impossible to discern. Like a guy in his basement in Romania who realizes I can make all this money. Somebody being paid or being encouraged, or worse yet, not being paid, but being encouraged
No,
through
the real
other
believers
means.
are always more effective than the paid ones.
Yeah, that's the thing that people don't realize. Oh, you're a paid Russian informant. The paid ones are sloppy and they don't mean it and they won't do a good job. True believers who do it for free, you can't trace that. So that shows you what you can know about the world, right? Back to this intellect thing. The intellect works great for things you can know about the world. You can't know someone's beliefs as easily as you think, and you can't intellectualize your way to them. That's for sure. Which isn't to say you can't apply some very simple, basic first order logic principles. Which, by the way, anybody says they're good at logic, they can't do basic first order logic. I don't know why that's true, but just 100% so far. Thousands of samples at this point. None of them can do it.
They say they're
They
good at logic and they can't
you can,
actually do it.
you can use logic to derive certain types of things under certain very specific circumstances with what I would call a hell of a lot of data, although sometimes it's the right data. So, for example, I'll give you this example I've been working on. I don't know if I'm going to use it yet in a video, but if I do, say la vie, you can see it twice. If you knew, for example, that I think it was 2012, but I don't remember the exact year, that 60 Minutes did a piece. Now, this is 2012. This is back a ways, right? 60 Minutes did a piece talking about a company whose sole business was to create fraudulent, forged banking documents for mortgages. That's all they did. Didn't do anything else. Okay. You can use logic to derive that the only reason why that could possibly exist in the world, using basic first order logic, is that the banks had to have been committing large scale fraud about what they own. There's no other way that could happen in the world, right? Now, of course, you have to work back.
And we're assuming a business of a certain scale here. I haven't seen the 60 Minutes documentary, but it's not like they made 30 of these things.
No, it's a huge business, right?
Yeah.
With so there's only one way to do that, and that's if the scale of the fraud is very large. Now you have to work from it backwards. You have to say, what would cause this to exist? You can't go at it the way conspiracy theorists go at things, because that's how you get conspiracy theories, right? You can't go at it from, if I don't assume this thing exists, what are the things it could do? And therefore, what any one of those things could justify its existence. So, for example, you could take the Egyptian pyramids and say, all right, well, what could justify the existence of the Egyptian pyramids? Oh, well, it could be ancient aliens, right? I mean, it could be. That's not illogical, unreasonable, or irrational at all, because logic, reason, and rationality can't tell you anything about that coming at it from that angle, right? You can logic your way into, you don't need ancient aliens to explain it and Occam's razor, and therefore, but A, you can't rule out ancient aliens, and B, you have to go backwards to do that. You can't start from, oh, the pyramids exist and therefore, right? You have to start with telos to figure out what happened. And when you start with the telos and do the logic, you can actually use the logic. If you don't do that, the logics can justify anything. And that was the argument. I mean, I told, I did a video of Van Clay, like 4 years ago now, or maybe even 5, I forget, about this, where I talked about things like, oh yeah, this was the game, pre-trolling, but also there was a game. It was called trolling. It was a game. We all knew what we were doing. Everybody involved knew what was happening, right? You were using the best logical argument to justify an absurdity. And we would go into like, I can prove the ancient aliens, built the pyramids because the Maya and the, and you'd make these long chain, very clever logical arguments. And we had a way to score it. I got rather good at it eventually. We had all this. This is in the early 90s, right? We had all this, right? But we knew it doesn't work. Like, logic doesn't work that way. It can't rule things out, unless it's done a certain way. And it can't tell you things unless you start from the right set of assumptions. Like, what would justify a large business with hundreds of employees cranking out literally tens or hundreds of thousands of pieces of fraudulent paperwork to exist? Oh, well, there had to be large-scale banking fraud in the mortgage sector, because they only did mortgage paperwork, and they only had, bank executives, sometimes fake bank executives, signatures on these papers, right? And 60 Minutes is an expose on this, and no one smart enough apparently to use basic first-order logic to say, oh my goodness, the scale of the fraud, right? Another way to know the fraud existed is to just read the Wikipedia article, which I believe is still up and accurate. If not, go to an earlier version from the 2008 collapse, although I think the collapse happened in 2007, of Taylor B. and Whitaker. And then say, well, if Taylor B. and Whitaker was doing that and they got audited and they didn't get caught, what else could possibly have been going on in the mortgage arena, right? Because they weren't the only ones. Maybe the scale of their fraud was greater because they made up addresses wholesale and didn't get caught, because the auditors at Deloitte are dumber than you can possibly imagine. Like, how do you not catch that? Everyone else did. Actually, everybody else did. And so if you can't, if you don't start from the right place, you can't use the logic anyway. And also, to your original point when you sort of started the stream, more information doesn't help, but it sure as hell does hurt. And if you don't know when to stop getting information, you're completely screwed. You're completely screwed. You have to have a limit on the information, because what happens in a world of detail, you can go into as much detail as you want. Like, you can get lost in detail all day long and it never ends. It's actually infinite. So it's a dangerous thing.
Speaking of information and getting lost, for the people who are watching this on my channel, I put a link to Father Eric's live stream in the comments, and you should all come over to Father Eric's channel, and you should subscribe to his channel, and you should turn on notifications. You should like his videos, because Father
I'm getting raided. Oh no.
because Father Eric does this live stream every week. And it is an honor for us to have a genuine Roman Catholic priest who actually knows stuff to be involved and to talk about things actually knowing stuff, as opposed to the vast majority of people who just talk a lot about stuff they don't know anything about. So I am going to stop the stream on my end so that all of you people can come over to Father Eric's channel and like and subscribe.
Yes, yes. And all of the other YouTube stuff, I suppose.
Denise, good to see you. How are you doing? How's the quilting?
Oh,
My mic is still. Oh, my mic's on now. Is it better? I went through a whole song and dance to get off my phone and onto my tablet. Has that improved things?
well, we'll see how much delay
Hello?
there is.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. It's just delayed.
Yeah, there's a lot more delay on my. Huh. I don't know. This is very frustrating.
It is. It is. Sometimes
I lost so
you just
much
get these
time trying to.
latency spikes that
Yeah.
doesn't help anybody.
I wonder why. It seems to be not lagging the same in both directions. But,
right, because
oh well. Anyway, where were we?
Mark and I are all...
Yeah, he was. That was interesting. You were on lulcows, and then I got involved with wrestling with the internet technology to get back. So I lost track of what you were talking about, and when I come back, you appear to have gone a little bit off of lulcows. I can't pronounce it. Lulcows into the trolling history, and then pyramids and ancient aliens. So I don't. So basically, I am a genuine in the flesh LOL cow. It's better than trying to pronounce it, because that group, or a group that is pretty strange, had latched onto me. And it's a pretty serious thing. What Mark was talking about was like the early history when it was indeed an almost harmless game being played by young people who were more involved with technology than most at that time. But what has happened is two kinds of other people got involved. Gullible people who are easily victimized by games that require a lot of understanding of irony and, as he was explaining, logical fallacies and so on. And truly evil bad guys who see an opportunity to exploit the gullibles and go after targets and become mercenaries. And that's what happened in the 1990s. And this might be somebody you well, I'm sure it's somebody you know of, if you don't actually know. I'm not sure of your age, Father, but you appear to have been somewhat adult during the 1990s, and maybe you were in seminary or just after? No?
No, I'm apparently much younger than you're taking me for.
Okay. Well, then, if you were, you might have, I'm sure you know Father Mitch Pacwa, the EWTN Jesuit. Yeah. Okay. Well, back in the mid-90s, Father Pacwa was the expert witness in one of the trials that predate and are slightly related to the trolling problem. The internet was not part of this. Before the internet, you had card games. You had, Dungeons and Dragons was being played on cardboard boards out of books. And the other thing that was going on was a card game called The Gathering that people were accusing of getting kids involved with Satanism because the cards were sold at bookstores, which were frequented by adult occultists. And of course, and it's easy when you, Jonathan Peja would have a field day with this topic. I'm sure he probably already has. It's easy to mix symbolic stuff with occult and fairy tales and true religious stuff. So this was a controversy during the 80s and 90s. If you comb through some of the satanic panic stuff, you may find that this was a controversy. Well, there was a trial in, let's see, I never knew Father Mitch Pacwa, but I knew one of his colleagues was a man named Thomas White, who was a state police captain in Massachusetts. He was investigating this type of activity. And he was involved with investigating cult-like activity related to children in the Bedford, New York school system, the public school. So parents brought charges, and the charges were based on sexual activity that was brought in by a substitute teacher in the art department. So the school had a background-checked official art teacher, but then that official art teacher was able to bring in a substitute to oversee activities. These kindergarten children were subjected. I can't give you the exact year, but it was the mid-1990s, because now it happened let me track my timeline. It happened when I lived in Boston, which was 1997 and 98. And the connection to the whole lulcow troll system is this. The children were being recruited. They weren't really being recruited. They were being used by these art teachers. The police were beginning to investigate because there were gang cases in Boston that were turning up this occult stuff. And you had the satanic panic people running around doing what they did during Pizzagate, getting everybody so upset over absurd narratives that cases couldn't be properly investigated. And because it involved art teachers and so on, and I was in that circle, I was aware of it, and I became involved in discussions with Thomas White, who was investigating, and he took an itinerary paper, because in court you couldn't show up with copies taken from print-offs. You had to have the original document. And so he handed Father Pacwa the itinerary curriculum syllabus, that's the word I mean, from a teachers' conference that the state was requiring teachers to attend, which was showing art teachers how to present sacrificial pagan rituals as art projects. The trial was Dinozzi, Dinozzi, and Dibari, Dibari. Those are the two families who sued the Bedford school system. So it was Dinozzi, Dibari v. Bedford. Then it got changed to just one of the families because the court said they couldn't sue if they took their children out of the public school. And one of the families put their children in parochial school to get them away from the situation. So the court said they couldn't sue, and the other family stayed on. So the final case was in one of those names. And Father Pacwa was an expert witness who went in for the purpose of proving that the public school system knew what it was doing when it did this art project. Captain White, that would be Thomas White's interest, was coming out of the Boston gang situation where he was working with animal cruelty agencies because they were running into animal torture cases that the police were finding were involved with the gangs and were being used to frighten and indoctrinate children. That's how he got involved. And he was Catholic, and so it was easy for him to connect with Father Pacwa. And Father Pacwa went in with that document because I provided that itinerary from a third grade fellow art teacher who gave me all the material. He had gone to the conference and he was extremely upset by it. He was a gay man, and he was extremely upset that the gays were being invited as if they would be into this. And he provided me with the documentation that I gave to State Police Captain White, who then handed it over to Mitch Pacwa. So Father Pacwa was an expert witness. They threw out all of the sexual activity so that the school could not be charged with that. But Pacwa came in with the idea that there was a religious issue. They were targeting the Catholic, they were going against Catholic beliefs and doctrines by requiring the children to be part of these ritual art projects without informing the parents and getting consent and all that. So the whole case went forward as a religious freedom case instead of a sexual abuse case. And the result was that a slap on the wrist to the Bedford school system, don't do that no more, blah, blah. And the press wrote about it as if it was a bunch of people getting upset about a card game, but the card game was not even part of, it might have been played in the classroom, but it was not even part of the ritual. It was part of the media hype. And how does this connect to being a lulcow? That gang that got its claws into the little troll network of, young adolescent nerds and has progressed to where it is today, definitely had it had its claws into that situation. And I've thrown out a lot of stuff now that people are all getting their eyes glazed over, so I probably should stop. But that's how I came to become a lulcow, was being involved with this struggle, this fight, whatever you want to call it, between, the principalities and us normal, regular people.
Yeah. I was able to. I'm going to mute you because every time somebody else talks, we get that nasty sounding feedback there. I think I found either a case or a very closely related case that seems to match the basic fact pattern. Looks like I might have the federal case if it was appealed at a certain point. I'm just not sure what to do with all that information that was just dumped on us.
Yeah.
There's certainly some bad behavior, but the Jesuits do get a lot of flack nowadays. But when you meet the good Jesuits, they're really, really good. And Father Pacwa is one of the really, really good ones there. I actually had the opportunity to meet him when I was in seminary and at the EWTN studios in Alabama. And when he found out that we were all seminarians, he took us over to his house and showed us all his hunting trophies. So that was a lot of fun there. But I suppose that there's always people prowling around doing evil, and if it smells funny, it's probably funny, and if not, then hopefully we're all going to be all right. We will all be all right. Hopefully it's not too painful in our pathway to all right.
There's a great deal of overlap to Denise's point. So like the dirty, smelly, druggy hippies I lived with in the late 80s and early 90s, unfortunately, they were all into Magic the Gathering and they were all online. And I don't think any of those, although you never know, but I don't think any of those guys were involved in like Goatsy or anything like that, although I wouldn't put it past a couple of them. They were involved in bad behavior and bad activity. And one of them, there were all these rumors around because they had a coven and he wasn't in our direct circle, but he circled the circles of little people. His coven was involved somehow in a murder. That's all I knew. And I didn't want to know anymore. So I never found. So like those actors are out there, and they built the internet. And I'm just sorry to tell you, but that actually, I was there. It definitely happened that way. I'm sorry. Like they didn't build like the DARPA, the original DARPANET stuff, but the stuff in the 80s with a big company called FTP Software, which is responsible for pretty much all the protocol standardizations, not just for file transfer protocol, but for a bunch of things. Yeah, I mean, I knew a bunch of those guys. And yeah, a lot of them were bad news. Not all of them, right? Not all of them. But if you wanted to do a crazy materialist measure, which isn't invalid, but a little sus, way more bad actors than good actors. Like the 90% bad actors to 10% good actors ratio is about right on that one. I hate to say it, but I was there and I know those people, and yeah, a lot of them were very, very horrible people, very horrible, and they were involved in all kinds of bad behavior. And to be a little fair, there were a lot of people that I knew who were highly technical and fairly good people who, for example, did not want gay marriage because they were gay and they knew that was a bad idea. And so that was the crowd that I was hanging with when I was very young, right?
So as somebody who spent way too much time playing Magic the Gathering, and owns way too many Magic cards and spent a lot of time on the Magic Pro Tour, I can say that it's kind of like the thing which gathers people who may have other problems. I don't think it's the cause. I think it's people who have problems gravitate towards that type of stuff. So there is definitely a problem which you will see when you spend enough time around there. But I think that problem is caused mostly by materialism and not having real community, etc. People who are just playing Magic as a card game between friends, I think it can be it's just fine. It's a card game to play with your friends. If you turn it into a lifestyle, if you turn it into like something like that, then and especially for people who don't have a religion, when they turn it into their religion and their fantasy life, I mean, you see the same thing with the Harry Potter.
Yeah, the point of what I talked about was that wasn't even really the issue. The media made the card game be the focus, but the stuff that was going on in the classroom, we don't even know for sure if the card game was even used. So there's like two layers. There's, what you're talking about is the actual social circle of those kind of fantasy games, and they do accidentally attract people of a certain weakness, and then some people deliberately exploit that. But what was going on in the information dump I just did was really that the media will not talk about what's really going on, but they'll grab something like the Magic Gathering card game and turn that into the story so that people argue about that instead of ask real questions about how that substitute teacher was brought in under the radar and why they went after two whole kindergartens, and the parents only found out when they were seeing trauma behavior in their children, and psychologists working with the families and other people, that they discovered, no, these kids have been traumatized. What happened? Then they uncovered the events, and then the trial involving Father Pacwa involved a document that proved that it was not simply an accident of an immature or confused art teacher playing with the kids. It was actually part of a planned out program. And the reason that third grade teacher was so upset, he was a fellow artist. We had our studios next to each other in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and there was a building that was all artists. And the reason he was upset is that he was Christian. He was struggling with the Christian, he was going to the Assembly of God and struggling with their doctrines against homosexuality. And he was, like most people in the arts, well, we were totally comfortable with gay adults because they kept pretty much to themselves. We respected each other as adults. And the gays in those days, 80s and 90s, they still drew a line between adult behavior and children. And they were not offended if they were told, look, don't talk about your lifestyle around the kids. That was considered part of an agreed social contract, okay? And the sinful parts of it were left up to religious beliefs. But that whole fight really came to a head because during the 80s and 90s, you had the arts programs presenting homoerotic photography with children as the subjects. There was the famous Mapplethorpe case at the same time. That involved National Endowment for the Arts funding. That involved the Clintons. And, we can go into conspiracy la-la land with that. But the point I was making was, or that I'm trying to make now, is that these discussions that get off base into the question of the value or danger of a card game are the distraction from what's really going on. Anyway, I'm going to mute because I know there's all kinds of tech problems.
Yeah, that's definitely, that happened with D&D too, Dungeons and Dragons, right? There was a whole scandal around all kinds of bad things, some of them involving children. And then, it got brought up that the thing they have in common was they all play this weird game nobody had ever heard of, right? And that got brought into the 80s satanic panic as well. Oh yeah, look at this Dungeons and Dragons thing, right? Because there is an overlap, but that's how they trivialize it. They point at a game and say, oh, they're just talking about the game. And it's like, no, we weren't talking about the game at all. You found the patterns that Jacob pointed out to, right? The pattern that a lot of these people also play these games because these games appeal to people who don't like, we'll say, well-ordered, traditional ways of engaging. And then, I think also, one of the problems is there's actually a very strong community. So the people that I was involved with in terms of being a roommate of and very little else, like they ran a science fiction convention called Eresia. Like one of my former roommates who I actually took from that place and like, he was reasonably decent. He ran Eresia for like 10 years or something. But like, and Eresia was an interesting place. When I was much younger in the beginning, I think it was probably their third year or something. I could walk around there without a badge because everybody knew me in security. So they're like, "Oh no, that's Mark. He can go anywhere. Don't worry about it." Right? But they had a very strong community. It was just a community full of weirdos and freaks and people doing very bad things.
I'm curious about this community that you mentioned earlier, Mark, that were like all of the people who were standardizing the protocols for the internet.
Yeah.
And so you would have known at least about most of the major players there, and you've given them a very poor assessment as moral agents and general human beings. So as much as you're capable of seeing this, I'm contrasting the internet that we have now, very flat, very decentralized, hard to take out, hard to control.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who laid down the standards for all of that.
Yep. Yeah, they're all, you got to remember, almost all of these people are anarchists. And in, I guess I'll have to brag to some extent. So like one of a very good friends of mine who was in that crew, I spent 4.5 hours once when I probably was 18 years old and actually proved to him that anarchy is unsustainable. Right? I proved it to him using logic. It took me 4.5 hours, which, I had more of a stamina for it back then. If you can imagine such a thing, I have done 8-hour live streams. This is something that I was capable of. I doubt I could do it today. But he got talked out of it. He was no longer running around going anarchy and basically I proved to him beyond a shadow of doubt that if you try to instantiate anarchy, that means I personally, physically, me, this person is in charge. And he realized immediately, that I was right when I got to the end of the argument, which took 4.5 hours. So it's a very long argument. In the last half hour, he realized, oh, no, you're absolutely right. This is a dangerous thing. No one wants you in charge. And I'm like, yeah, no one wants me in charge. Like I have very radical beliefs about how things should be, and I ain't afraid of gulags. So, I think they're a great idea. So long as I'm the one saying who's going in, I'm all for them. That usually, by the way, dissuades anybody else from wanting them. I've used that strategy literally for decades, almost my entire life. It's never failed. The minute you agree with somebody on gulags, on the condition that you get to say who goes in them, they suddenly don't like gulags anymore. I don't know what it is. Who knows? But these people who started the early internet, and some of whom were deliberately tapped by DARPA, by the military, they were all anarchists, and that was a wise move in a way if what you wanted was a thing that couldn't be brought down. If you want a network that can't be brought down by a natural disaster or a nuclear war, which was the goal, by the way, the telos, pay attention to telos, it tells you everything. That tells you everything. Nothing else tells you anything, by the way. Or not everything else can tell you anything. Right? The telos tells you everything. Yeah, and nothing extra, which is super important. So that's what they wanted. Those are the people who would have thought about that the most and who would know how to do it. And they were, in some cases, recruited. In some cases, they just kind of glommed on and, oh, look, there's a lot of money in this FTP software. John Romkey, I know these guys, right? And, there's nothing right. Brilliant. My buddy who was the anarchist, like, he's insane. He's so smart. He, at one point, he said, oh yeah, no, I learned German in college because I wanted to read Nietzsche in the original German. And I was just like, who does? And he knows like a ton of languages. Like, I remember it was a while ago now, but it was at least 15 years since I know for a fact he had done anything in Latin. I had done a Google translation in Latin, and the Google translator screwed it up. And my Latin, I failed Latin, so there you go. My Latin was never good. It was never that good. I didn't catch it, and he did. And I posted it on Facebook or something, and he's like, "Who the hell did this Latin grammar? That should be blah 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 blah." And I'm like, only this guy could possibly like not engage with a language, with a dead language, an unspoken language that I'm sure he didn't engage with, because I knew roughly what he was doing at the time. And, like, he wasn't even in those extreme drug circles anymore. And just know from all those years ago in college when he took it, which, he was at least 20 years out of college by that point, that this was wrong. Like, these guys, like, you see smart people in the world. These guys are way smarter than the smartest person you've ever seen on YouTube. Way smarter. They're insanely bright. They're just.
I think I've been in the room
bright.
with those types before.
It's nuts.
Yeah.
I've been in a room with a bunch of them, and it's crazy. It's just like totally overwhelmed, and
you're just trying to keep up.
Well, and the way but you can identify them sometimes by the way they talk. Well, first of all, they don't talk a lot, typically. But they have there's all kinds of patterns, right? And so they have certain patterns of speech and engagement, which are different things. And you can just, figure out like, oh no, this is one of those people with, like my stepfather had an unrecorded IQ, right? Like, oh, the test doesn't even apply. Right. So my stepfather was like that. So he knew a lot of people like that. Mm-hmm. And that, those people are like they're so much smarter than the people that you see who are willing to say anything publicly ever. That it's not a contest, right? We're talking
See, I
about
think I had one of these types as a professor in seminary, and we were all
Yeah,
just
that's
trying to
what it
keep
was.
up in Dr. Hip's class because we were just the Starship Aquinas was going at warp 9. It was a great time. I really enjoyed my classes, but it took me a little bit to like get accustomed to that level of instruction. I was not accustomed to it.
I was gonna ask, do those types generally go into STEM or do they tend to go into the humanities in your experience?
I bet you everybody. I mean, obviously, the types that Mark was meeting were in
They were all
computers,
they were all tech.
but
Yeah, like my yeah. So like uh one of the guys I know from there, I think he might not have worked at FTP Software, but like when he was in college, and he did tell this interesting story about making nitroglycerin and that going horribly wrong. They were perfectly safe because they knew how to be safe making nitroglycerin in case it went horribly wrong. But it did blow up the dorm, and one of the fraternities got blamed and was banned from campus, and they just never said it was them. Anyway, so he when he was interning for the Air Force or something, or I think it was the Air Force, he came up with a chart. And I think this is back in the 70s or 80s. I don't remember. I don't remember what he told me. He came up with a chart that talked about the nuclear fallout spread and all that. It was done with all the silly math calculations, and he found out 15 years later that it was still in use in all the facilities. So like that's he wasn't even out of school, right? But I mean, when I was talking to him, he had 12 patents. This guy was ridiculously intelligent, and it's not about where they gravitate towards, because what ends up happening is, like my stepfather, uh, unfortunately, all his books got stolen. Like he had a complete set of lobes, which is the Latin with the English translation and the Greek with the English translation on the other page. So if you look up lobes, they're very, very interesting books. He did all that study on his own. I don't think he took any philosophy in school, uh, but I'm sure he knew philosophy better than all the other people on the internet combined today, and all the people that will ever be on the internet ever, ever, ever. And I'm sure, I'm 100% positive that's where a lot of my no, this is a wrong interpretation comes from, because I didn't meet any of those guys, right? But I sure did ask him a lot of questions, and the one skill that he had for sure, although I'm, to be fair to myself, a little bit easy because I can do very broad translations from different domains very easily. He was very good at explaining stuff to me. So like I terrible at math, and he could just explain complicated mathematical concepts to me very easily in very little time. He just he was one of those rare ones. Like there were a few of his friends, for example, who were extremely bright, but you couldn't really talk to them. You couldn't ask them questions because they couldn't answer them in a way. But like he worked at like think tanks and stuff like that. He did whatever he wanted. But most of those people study technology because that's where all the interesting problems are. So they're either math geeks or nuclear physics type geeks in those cases, right? But like if you meet those people, you're not going to have a good time. The chances that you'll even understand what they're talking about are pretty low in general. And even if you do, like, I mean, they're just going to talk at a level about things that you're not going to necessarily be able to catch up to unless they're in academia and they know how to teach, which is rare, but it does happen, to your point, Father. So yeah, it's likely when they're good, they're really good. Like my stepfather was freaking amazing. I wish I had any of his stuff. Like he had some great papers on things and some stuff that my mother wanted me to get published and stuff. So if that hadn't gotten completely stolen, I would have done that. But here we are. Those they're very interesting people, and yeah, a lot of them, especially with the internet, saw that opportunity to monetize their skills in a way that they would not have been monetizable before. I don't think that was a good thing, by the way, but that's what happened.
And here we are. Here we are. It's, it's just useful to remember that these top 1% performers, they get a lot done. And I think their lives just are oftentimes very unpleasant because they don't have the benefits of being ordinary.
Yeah.
Where you can just kind of like go with the flow and not worry about things. The very top percent of people who are just kind of like, you're a little obsessed at that level, and it it benefits all of us, and it's not necessarily bad. I was actually talking about this at the gym today. We were talking about Daniel Day-Lewis, and I made the point. It's like, you know what? One is a good number of Daniel Day-Lewis's,
Yeah.
because he's just really good at acting, and he gets really into it, and we get some great movies out of it. But like, we don't need half of the population to be like that. Like, that'd be a disaster. We wouldn't have gotten at it. We need half the population to just do ordinary jobs and have families. Like, that's what we got to point people at.
Yeah, we need that mix and that integration. And I think for a lot of people, and this is where it really, this is sort of, part of the thesis that we've been working on, in the Mark of Wisdom community, right? Is that, look, you can over focus on propositions, on logic, reason, rationality. And for most people, not the 1%, the top 1% is as far away from the next 9% as the top 10% is from the 90%, right? Like, it's an exponential curve, right? For most people who aren't in the top 10%, which is most people, right? Like, just to be double clear about this, right? They're going to have to trade off. Like, if you want to be smart or even sound smart or try to play with the big dogs, because you're not actually going to be playing with the big dogs. They might be nice to you, but you're gonna trade social skills for that. Like, there's some kind of trade-off between, we'll call it the propositional and the poetic. I have much more formal terms for this on my YouTube channel, but you're gonna trade that off. I mean, that's just the way it is. And I've noticed this, I've seen this, I've experienced it myself. When this works with pretty much anything. Like, when you stop coding every day, your social skills actually improve, and you suck more at coding. Which is not to say that I suck at coding. I don't, but I'm not anywhere near the level I was when I was coding every day. Like, there's no comparison between those two me's, right? But also, like, my ability to appreciate poetry, for example, as in that actual thing, is enhanced by the fact that I'm not constantly trying to perform at that level, right? Because there was a point that I reached, especially when you get introduced to these people, you realize you're not going to be the best coder in the world. You're not going to be the 10th best coder in the world. That's not going to happen, right? And I realized that fairly early on. Thank God I learned that really early on. And so I didn't pursue that, and I began more of this investigation into this, we'll say way before I had words for it, because I would have been, some of the words I'm using I have been using since I was like 17, right? But some of this is newer terminology, and thanks to Dr. John Vervaeke and Dr. Jordan Peterson and guys like that, and Nassim Taleb, but mostly for helping me see things, but also for a little bit of vocabulary adjustments. So that's a whole different thing, and it's important to recognize that, like, you have to pick your trade-offs in life very carefully, and I think that's a trade-off, and no one's talking about trade-offs. No one. Everyone's just assuming everyone has an infinite capacity, and the difference is education, and that's false. It's observably false.
Denise, if you're trying to communicate with us, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Okay. Sometimes my finger goes twice and I forget to check.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's another part to this, and it's very difficult to deal with because it happens unintentionally. It happens with good intentions, and it also happens maliciously. And it starts in the preschool kindergarten level that the that top 1%, the people that score above the 99th percentile, are quickly identified and targeted for takedown by the teachers, by the structure, because the structure doesn't really know how to accommodate them even within the elementary education. And then it's hard to explain, but there's a pathology that goes with it in terms of intelligence being designated as a pathology, because they don't communicate exactly the same way the average person does, and that gets written up as poor social skills. There's no, I mean, I'm a product of the French parochial system, which is very different from the American public school system. And it was in a community that was in and of itself a generation behind everyone else. And so really, by the time I was going to school, we were 50 years behind the rest of the culture, which was good because the things we learned were incredible. I mean, but one of the things that happened was the teachers in the French parochial system, the nuns were part of the family community. They were part of the parish, and they knew the families. And so they would identify children very early on in terms of what career path they should aim for. You know, whether they should become a Father Mitch Pacwa or, you know, go into the trade. And the trades were also part of the education system. There was no, right now, you're a failure if you want to study welding or carpentry, unless you want to do it as an artiste, you know. But when I went to school, we had trade schools where they were right there alongside the kids who were going into the programming and tech
and
level.
Economics.
Hmm?
And home economics.
Yeah, home economics. Yeah, and it was all highly respected. But I was in the generation that saw the attacks. And I know that one of the things that my father, I don't really know how far I want to get into this, but it's a little personal disclosure, I guess. The nuns took my mother aside when I was in kindergarten and tried very hard to explain to her that I was not retarded. And my father was a savant. And if he was a savant in technology, and he worked in the space program with an 8th grade education. And the way he survived was they would hand him a blueprint of something to make, because he was a tool maker. If they didn't have the machine to make the thing, he made the machine to make the thing. And he was at Pratt & Whitney Aircraft when they had the space contracts, the Gemini program. So they would hand him a blueprint. He could look at the blueprint and he could see the thing finished. Then he would bring it back to the engineers and say, you know, this isn't going to work. This piece right here is the wrong dimensions. You've got to redo this. And they'd ask him for the equations. And he would just look him in the eye and say, hey, college boy, you can do the math. I've got work to do. And he would walk away. He had never taken a trigonometry course. But we got to the moon on guys like him with wooden slide rules. And when he was in his 90s, he was still beating the computer with that slide rule. And I know he took me aside especially when this fight started up between my mother, who was quite sure that both my little brother and I were absolutely retarded. And she had a theory that if you have too many children, the youngest children, there are no genes left for them. That's why they're retarded. And she believed it. And it was basically, she was trying to compensate for the fact that she had 2 change of life surprises, me and my little brother. But my father took us aside and said, look, don't let people see what you can do, because they're not going to like it. And I didn't really understand it. But, I scored up in those percentiles. I didn't have enough credits to graduate high school because I fooled around all the way through high school. But I scored up in those percentiles, so I was automatically not only accepted, but given scholarships, and got to college and had no clue what I was going to do. So I became I started having fun with the radical politics and joined the anti-war movement. And my art was just always my art, because it was outside the system. But I look at these people that are products of the public school system, and there's an entire level that's missing, because the public school does not have a sense of mission the way the parochial schools had a sense of mission. They were to identify, they identified the ones who were destined for the convent or the priesthood very early, and made sure they got what they needed. And they identified everyone according to their abilities. But the public school system just wants to drug the children and keep them quiet and get another raise for the teachers. They have no sense of why they're educating those kids. Anyway, that's my rant. I'm going to mute again.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost as if, one system was run by people who have an implicit understanding of hierarchy and the goodness and the inevitability of it. And the other system is run by people with an obsession about equality, and you could see. There was another conversation I had recently about a guy who was, he's just about to graduate college, and was just curious about the different religions around him. And he was asking me about it. And, I told him kind of my, like I just came up with it, over beers and sausage at Worst Beer Hall. Like the fundamental question of the Protestant Reformation is about these layers between us and God that the Catholic Church had set up. And are they good or are they bad? And which way you come down on that question will decide if you're going to be, Cathodox or Anglo-Cathodox, because Mark likes to throw a little bone to the Anglicans there, who have a little more ritual to them. Like our friend John here, who goes Anglican Church in North America, or the more radical parts of the Reformation there. So, yeah, and you play these things out for long enough, I think you can see why I've landed on the side that I have. So
it's funny, Father Eric, because I think the last month or so has been my most intense interest in Catholicism that life so far, which is not to say that I'm there, but it's because of the things you were starting to describe there, of like, oh, okay, so the Archbishop of Canterbury is now a woman, and now all of a sudden we have this schism in the Anglican Communion, and the African bishops are like, I mean, they were this close to jumping ship anyways, but this was kind of like the final straw for them. They're like, we're out of here. And they contain like 85% of the total membership, GAFCON, of across the world of the Anglican Communion, and they're saying, we are the Anglican Communion now. It's like it's kind of like if if say you have a bunch of Southern Baptist churches in Ontario, they break away from the Southern Baptist Church and they say, only us above north of the Mason-Dixon line, we're the Southern Baptists now. Kind of like
We're losing John apparently.
Oh, I wanted to hear that.
Yeah,
Well,
he's a robot city. But
Yeah.
that's always the Protestant problem with naming, is that they constantly split, and then
Oh,
they
boy.
constantly have to rename, and then they can't decide like who should hold the mantle, whatever mantle they're holding, because it's not old enough. So who cares? But,
Well, apparently GAFCON recently started sending missions to the United Kingdom to try to convert them to Christianity.
yeah, good.
I mean, I guess that's not really all that different than like having a bunch of Nigerian priests in,
Yeah.
or like Filipino priests in Italy, you know, because I met Nigerian and Filipino priests when I was in Italy last, you know, and it's like, well, you know, here we are.
Well, there are certain things which I've seen. I guess the archbishops or cardinals from the south have kind of like when there was the whole question of blessing gay couples. Like they were like, no, we're not having any of this, and the Vatican had to rethink about it, which I thought was a good influence.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I remember
Well,
my
and
bishop.
then
No, never mind that.
and then then Father James Martin, the ever crafty and conniving Father James Martin, comes along, and his bishop presumably also allows him to. So I'm kind of here like, okay, I'm looking for a church that's got a foundation, but what okay, then this particular Catholic diocese did this thing with this openly gay man and confirming him. It's
So
like, okay,
so here's something to think about, right? Are there any costs to having perfect doctrinal purity? Let's say in your body.
yeah, I mean, like, you can't, because real life is so much messier than doctrine. Yeah.
Right. So, you know, as irritating as I might find a snake-like priest who's constantly using equivocations to hide what seems to be an odd agenda here. It does end up working against his own purposes and strengthening the body, you know. So there maybe is a deep wisdom in the very very slow reticence of our bishops to strike down, you know, excommunicate right away. I think the progressive wing of the Catholic Church ends up providing the whole with a lot more anti-fragility over time.
Yeah.
Just because we're facing all of these shocks internally, and we come up with the arguments themselves there.
Well, it's the church. It's the church is an ideal, and if I ever get the freaking mega project to work, I'll find out when Pastor Vanderclay was talking about that, because actually he did a pretty good job. Granted, he stole it all from Joey, but still.
I have to ask, Father, what is the canonical status of a confirmation where the sponsor of the confirmee claims to be gay married to the one getting confirmed? Like,
Well,
that
the
seems
nice
null.
that wouldn't actually nullify it, but the only thing that would nullify sacrament of confirmation, if you used improper form or matter, right? So that was, you know, we can toss that aside. Presumably, he followed the liturgical books. B, the only thing that would nullify it entirely is if internally the person had an intention against confirmation, and like we're just not going to presume that. However, if somebody receives the sacrament of confirmation in the state of mortal sin, they will receive the mark of confirmation, but none of the effects. So they won't receive the grace that should come along with confirmation. But if they go to confession, then that grace will show up. So that's the way that we would handle a strictly theoretical situation such as that.
It's an interesting kind of argument you made, Father Eric, about the the progressive wolves may be providing some anti-fragility, because I'm still fundamentally a Protestant, and there's like this much more purity impulse in Protestantism, because when I saw that, I was like, defrock the priest, defrock the bishop, get this.
I'm not
crap
saying
out
that
of
would
the
be
church, you know?
wrong, but
Yeah. It's just
We
not
would-
the default response, maybe.
yeah, well, it's like fired up young priest from the Midwest, like he would be moving pretty quickly towards these things. And well, it is a Jesuit parish, and he does have a Jesuit superior, so that does tell you something. And then it's also the Archdiocese in New York City, I think, where this was happening.
Yeah.
Unless I'm not sure I have that fact correct. And this place, St. Paul's, with their very strange ministry there, has been allowed to continue, and I'm not in any position to shut it down. So maybe if I knew more, I would make the same decision. I can't say that I wouldn't, right? Because maybe just having like a container for all of that, so it doesn't go out and infect everywhere. Like maybe that's better. I don't
Start a new-
actually know. I might
Start a
make
whole
that trade.
whole new schism, which we don't need more, right? Schisms are the problem. Like but if you wanted to just nail the meaning crisis in one statement, schisms. That's it. Just the word schisms, right? The more you schism, the more domicide you have, period. Just it's a mathematical certainty, it's a spiritual certainty. There's no ambiguity, right? And so you don't want that. And also the fact is you can't change things if you throw them out. Right? If you say you're not under my authority anymore, the odds you're going to make a change to it, drop to pretty much zero, and you immediately make it worse, right? Which is my same argument against, even though I love the reforms, because it's Anglo-Catholic, Protestant, and Reform in the way I'm dividing things up. Although we'll see, the Anglicans are around next week.
No guarantee.
But the my argument against reform is you guys are outside the church, and so you can't do the reform from outside. Like so like that's why the anti-fragility is required, right? And that's also why Protestantism as such does not have the effect that they pretend that they're trying to create.
I would make a stronger case just for the magisterial Reformation, excuse me. I think the real heretics in this whole thing are the radical Reformation. Just like, we're going to reject everything. We're going to throw it all out. We're not going to have any connection. It's like just the Bible, or really my interpretation of the Bible. And I think that experiment has, the fruits of that are very clear, and it's not good, but then I see my own sort of communion doing that thing. It's like, okay, nope, they left the orthodoxy, so we're just gonna pull out. This is it, and we are the captains now. This feels like what they're saying. It's like, is it Anglicanism if you're not in communion with the Archbishop of Canterbury? Is it Catholicism if you're not in communion with the Bishop of Rome? Does that even
No, I can answer that one for sure. If you're not in communion
easy
with the Bishop of Rome, it's not Catholicism. This is really simple.
Now
But
Canterbury
Anglicanism they can't make the claim, and they don't have the tradition.
Well, and Canterbury has never had the same level, even close to the same level of authority. It's more just formal and ceremonial than anything else. But we know from Peugeot that symbolism that does matter, and so it's like if Canterbury falls, so to speak, like we're either just going to do this radical Reformation thing, or maybe some of us will swim the Tiber. I don't know.
It fell. You can't sit there while being elevated to a position in a hierarchy and say God's not in the business of hierarchies at the same time. Right? That's a fundamental
Is that a real quote?
Performative contradiction.
Thank you.
Is that a real quote?
Yes, that actually, as near as I can tell, that's what happened. Well, also, the core statement is fundamentally just completely wrong by any possible interpretation, right? And B, it's a performative contradiction. And so if you want a good, quick definition of Satanism, there it is. And if you want a quick, good definition of goodness, Jess, it's so good to see you.
It's so good to see you guys. I just wanted to come hang out. So many familiar faces, and Hadn't talked to you guys in a while.
I miss
Yeah.
you, man.
And John, congrats on completing all the 14ers. I was following your progress. It was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it was pretty awesome. I'm happy I did it. I also feel like I kind of reached like, okay, this is enough. You know, like Forrest, it's time to go home now, kind of thing. It's time to try to get married and have children and do all.
You're not going to go up to Alaska and start hiking peaks there.
In my fantastical moments, I think about that stuff all the time. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then I'm going to be like, well, okay, I have to like remind myself that God will give me all the time in the age to come to do that and without the pain and suffering. And so, yeah.
I have to brag. I actually got to meet Jess in real life. I have proof. There I am.
Awesome.
At a wedding.
Jacob and I shed tears together.
We did.
I don't have any
For real.
proof, but Jess will confirm that we met. So I don't have any evidence. We didn't take any pictures, Jess, but it's okay.
I've met
John
in
you don't have a
life
picture of us together?
and Father Eric in
Yeah,
real
okay.
life. I don't think I've ever met Mark in real life.
Nope, you haven't met me, Jacob.
Mark was the first person from the corner I ever met. Well, except for Ted. Ted came up to Kansas City and came by my office and we chatted. But I went down to Arkansas for Ted Sturt's event.
Awesome.
Stritz. And I opened up the bunkhouse door, and lo and behold, before my eyes was a Mark Lefebvre.
Ted
pleasure was
slept
mine.
in my apartment.
Did he really?
He slept here. He did. Yes.
Have you guys heard from him? I haven't heard anything.
No.
No.
He's I think his wife's working on number 6, or number 6 is in the world. So
Busy father.
if he's not around, it's not because he hates us. It's because he loves his children, and I can't fault him for that.
That's the best
I
excuse.
want another Arkansas poetry event. That was so wonderful. We had such a good time.
Yeah. Well, if Grim Grizz gets his way, we should be doing like these sort of like smaller retreat style estuary things on like a campground and stuff.
We could probably do that. I could get us hooked up with a retreat center in North Dakota. I just need to get done with my canon law degree first.
North Dakota. Who the hell wants to go to North Dakota? Come
Listen,
on.
North Dakota in June
During
is
summer.
beautiful. Yeah. I'm not saying tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be awful. It's going to be 30-mile-an-hour winds from the north and 4 inches of snow. We're not
It
doing
might be
anything
fun for
tomorrow.
some people. Get some gear and just go do it.
We raised $8,000 for Fountain of Comfort, and I haven't decided what we're going to do, but people are militating towards some sort of conference, but it would have to be mental health related. So, but there is that pot of $8,000 for anyone who can propose.
You raised 8. Congrats, Jacob. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, the people who donated, but people want us to actually do stuff, so hopefully we will. Yeah.
Who's the mental health people in the corner?
There's a few people. So Gage, do you know Gage? He's graduated with his MSW, so he's a clinical social worker. He's on our board of directors. Max recently got his LCSW, so he's like a fully licensed clinical social worker. Emma's husband graduated, and he's a counselor now.
Oh, you need to talk to, yeah.
Yeah, he's really smart, and he decided to become a school counselor. He's working at a Catholic school, actually. Mm-hmm. He would be a great person to talk to. And last I heard, Ryan Lewis was on schedule for graduating as well. He's down in Texas, and he's going to be a counselor. So we've got quite a few people.
Yeah, that is quite a few.
Sevilla, I haven't heard anything from in a long time, but she's a counselor. Yeah, Dr. Gary passed away, unfortunately. He was just shy of his 99th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was a psychiatrist for 70 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, We'll see if the Spirit draws us all together. The Holy
I hope
Spirit.
so.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah, we could do something maybe in the summer in North.
I think so. The place I have in mind, Maryvale, the building's ugly, but the grounds are just beautiful right there in the Cheyenne River Valley. So we could make do. We could make do with it. It was
Well,
just it had the
Arkansas.
misfortune of being built in the 60s. So
Yeah, Arkansas wasn't that pretty, but my goodness, being nestled in the edge of the Ozarks there, that was
Mm-hmm.
that was
kind of
peak. Yeah.
gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And I miss Ted. We got to find a way to get Ted back. What do we have to do?
I know. I'm going through Dante's comedy, and so I need to talk to Ted. I did the symbolic world walk through Inferno and Purgatorio, and now we're in Paradiso.
How's that? I've always wondered about their courses as opposed to say
it's pretty good. Like it's Richard Rowland, and he's just sort of like he's memorized all of history of Europe.
Yeah.
And then so I kind of wish it was like getting a little bit more into the poetics and the symbolism. And Peugeot is there in the class, but he says a couple things here and there, but basically Richard plans the class. He does a great job, but he talks a lot about context, political context, and connection to other literature and all this stuff, which is really helpful to know because there's so many references in that whole book that you can just get lost. And so we have the one by John Ciardi, or what's his name? The guy who translated it. It's a big fat book, and then it's got tons of notes and introductions, and so it's helpful just to have that book too.
Well, that's more. So I would classify that, just in case it's helpful. Maybe it's not. I would classify what Roland does more as poetics, and I don't particularly care for that type of poetics. So I love Richard Roland to death, but also no, I don't care about that stuff, right? Whereas more symbolic stuff would be more about the multi-connectedness of the thing. So I think Roland, if Roland has a flaw, which I'm not saying he does, is looking more at how do these things relate to tell this particular story. So he already has a story in mind that he wants to highlight, versus a more symbolic approach would be more like, well, what kind of connections can we make that this is validating, as opposed to connections not validating, which is most of them. And I tried to do a little bit of that in our Moby Dick book club on this channel. When I talked about the history, I said, "Oh no, you got to look at what's going on." And I had to flip between. I constantly had to make the decision, like, well, no, I do want to talk about the Industrial Revolution and the fact that there's kind of 3 in the United States, and this is one of them, right? And I had to juggle that with the look at all the connections that this is making with the meaning crisis, because Moby Dick's the first meaning crisis book, unbeknownst to me.
When does it get written? What year?
That's 1850s, right?
1850s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Melville's a genius, man.
He is. He's a real genius.
I get that some people, if you don't love his prose, it's going to be a painful time because, boy, is that a long book. But I think his prose is just brilliant. And it feels like I'm just eating candy the whole time. And I just enjoy it thoroughly. So that's what kept us going through that book club, because holy mackerel, that's a lot of books.
It was a long book club. Yeah, but he's doing interesting things, Melville. Like, he's throwing out, especially at the end, and I actually regret now that I didn't talk more about this. I got lost in our last episode of book club. Like, he throws out like a whole bunch of physical locations, like the Natural Bridge. The Natural Bridge is like down the street. It's 5 hours from here. I go by it all the time when I take the mountain route. Like, so he was probably at these places, but he's taking like a bunch of physical place names and relating them together and stuff. Like, there's lots of tricks he's doing that I couldn't even talk about, right? But he does stuff like that in Moby Dick. And because Moby Dick, if you follow my timeline for all this stuff, Although the Dugan Boyce interview was really interesting. He's just a little bit wrong about one very big thing. If you follow my timeline on all this, the materialism and the age of gnosis stuff, where knowledge is just reduced to propositions, and propositions are like become the highest value as a result, that fits the timeline for when that would have become apparent and why it sort of led the Industrial Revolution to a bad place, and then the bifurcation and the struggle, right? Because all the early industrialists that were actually smart, that were top 1%ers probably, they all did the social stuff along with the industry. And it was when they sold their businesses that got cleaved in half. And the Mill Girls of Lowell is the perfect example of that, where that got cleaved. And then the mills didn't work as well, but also that led to some of the exploitation later on. So the first valid unions, we'll call them, started because the mill girls weren't there anymore, but also the industrialists that started integrating society and industry together into one, because they weren't retarded, unlike everybody that came after them apparently. They knew what they were doing, but after that everything broke apart, and it's really kind of sad. But that you can see that thread through Melville quite clearly in the Wailing in a big way, and it also talks to the rise of America as the influence and darling of the world. I mean, New Bedford was the city that lit the world. That's a pretty big claim, but it was 100% true. That's ridiculous. This is before our big industrial revolution, right?
Right. Well, I got to run, guys. Thank you so much, Father Eric, for hosting this every Monday night. Keep up the good work. Enjoy North Dakota.
I will enjoy North Dakota, even in the snow.
You betcha.
See you guys around.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Gosh. There's probably still stuff we didn't catch in the Moby Dick book club, but what is it that you're looking at in the mid-19th century where people should be able to see the materialism?
Well, again, I think Melville points to it, right, when he's talking about the way the difference in the Wailing between, we'll say, the people that are doing it as a job and the the islanders who are really good at it, right, and some of the Europeans that are really good at it, right. And so you see that bifurcation that he's pointing out, and he gets more explicit in Meaning Crisis, as I think we mostly went over actually in the book club, but like you can see that he's highlighting that difference, right. And I think it gets lost because he's highlighting a lot of other differences, right, with the paganism and the Protestantism. There'd be a good argument to be made there, in my opinion, having thought, hadn't been able to ruminate on it all this time, that in fact he kind of understood the problem of Protestantism and what it was going to lead to, which, I mean, that's where I put everything. Like if you listen to Dugan, Alexander Dugan and Benjamin Boyce, which came out yesterday, I think, like if they just changed the timeline on what Dugan was talking about, you can nail it. You do it by timeline alone. You don't even need all the other stuff. Not to say 1100 wasn't important, of course it was, but and not to say that he's wrong when he talks about the split. He talks about this split between Plato and NATO, which is a clever play on words.
Plato and NATO.
Remotely wrong. Yeah, it's a good talk. It's a really good talk. That's why it's in important videos on my Discord. But like when you start to look at when things went wrong, they didn't go wrong in the 11 or 12 or 1300s, right? They went wrong after the Protestant Reformation, period, end of statement. And everything went wrong, and it went wrong in a very predictable way. And you can always trace the roots back. No kidding, the heresies have always existed, right? But they weren't a problem until Christendom was gone. And Christendom is not gone until the Reformation. And it's really kind of that simple. So you could look at it that way too. Like there's 3 or 4 different ways I can just explain to you. No, the Protestant catastrophe, not the printing press. The Protestant catastrophe is the problem. And it's very easy to trace using any number of mechanisms. They will all lead you to exactly the same conclusion.
Well, you could look at the end of Christendom there as somewhat parallel to your talk about the industrialists and their cleaving off of the social causes, and also the islanders who are really good at hunting whales versus the people who were doing it for pay, and like a lot of the corruption that we'll say afforded the conditions that led to the Protestant Reformation came from rent-seeking bishops, and like the whole thing being layered down with outrageous layers of corruption and darkness.
Yep.
And when we speak of darkness, we must look outside and see the darkness that has fallen on the world, and realize that rational creatures should go to bed under such circumstances. So it's been good to speak with you guys, but I am bringing this stream to a close. So good night and God bless you.
Good night.
God bless you guys. Good night.